All right, everyone. So I just thought that I would just jump on here just for a little bit to talk about the Business Cognate SBA. So welcome back to everything business, right? You know what to do already. You know you are to subscribe, hit the like button, right? Share with your friends, and just spread the love and spread the joy. All right. So I want to be talking about today, I want to be talking about the Business Cognate SBA, right? It has been requested, right, by popular demand. And so I want to talk about the Business Cognate SBA. I want to spend a little time to talk about it. All right. So I want to look at certain things. This is the mark scheme that you are seeing here. So this is what your teachers will be using to mark your SBA, right? And you know how the cognate is. So the business cognate is where you are able to use one SBA to cover for the other two subjects if you are doing all three subjects. So the cognate it entails economics, POB, and the principles of accounts. All right. So, for example, you're doing all three subjects, right? And let's say you're doing all three subjects, but you want to do, for example, a POB or a SBA for POB. The grade will be used for economics and for principles of accounts, just the same. All right. And if you're doing two, let's say you're doing accounts and POB, you can do either one SBA, right, for either accounts or POB, and the grade would be utilized. All right. So let us look at this rubric, right? I'm going to go through what it is that you need to ensure when before you start your your SBA. But let's look at the rubric, right? So the rubric, it starts with your table of content, right? You get mark for your table of content, 1 mark, right? You cannot have a table of content without having the page numbers, right? So you need to have the page numbers, right? You need to have the page numbers. If you don't have the page numbers, then the table of content is null and void, right? So you need to ensure that you have the page numbers. So ensure that the table of content reflect the topic in the SBA guidelines, right? So your statement of the topic, the objectives, right? Ensure that they are aligned. I normally tell my students to do the table of content last, right? So that you can ensure that all the pages are in sync with the table of contents. All right. The next heading that you'll have in your SBA is the topic, issue, or plot or problem, right? So it must be clearly stated. For this, you get 2 marks. 2 marks you get for this, right? So the topic must be clear. It must be a clear statement about what the SBA is about, right? For that, you get 1 mark. It must accurately describe the project, right? So the SBA topic must be reflected within the contents of the body of the SBA. So you get another mark for that. All right. So you want to ensure that the topic is something that you are interested in. Ensure that the topic is something that you are knowledgeable about or you have sufficient knowledge about it. All right. We're going to look at some examples of the topics in short order. Right. And then we look at the objectives. So the objectives of your SBA, right? For that section, you also get 2 marks for that section. All right. So your objectives must be clearly stated and they must be related to the topic or the issue or the problem that you are seeking to discuss. So let us look at something that I have here. All right. So you should be seeing right now, right? So the topic is you are the problem, right? So the exact topic is your or problem on which the research will focus after a preliminary review and observation of the bigger picture is done. So the components or aspects to be studied must be clearly stated and it must be precisely stated. Once the exact topic or the issue or the problem is clear and precise, it is easy to state the objectives of your research. So the details, right, will come later on in the background or the overview. So these are some examples. So look at these examples. An assessment of the impact of imported peanuts on Mr. Thompson's business, that is one example. A study of the extent to which production cost at Zebra Company affects profitability. This could be an accounts topic, right? An investigation into the factors which contribute to the decline in the sale of soap in Farm Fresh supermarket. This could also be an accounts topic, but it could work for POB as well. And next one, an investigation of the impact of the supply chain used by Bird Island Grocery Store, a study of the impact of the supply chain on the profitability of Apple Valley High School cafeteria. That is also an example of an accounts SBA, right? So you could see where those could be helpful, right? So look at the objectives now, right? So the objectives, it says the specific purpose and focus of the research project, and therefore the objective is specifies the purpose and focus of the research, and therefore what the instruments will cover, instruments, activities, and report will cover. So your objectives must be directly linked to the stated topic, issue, or problem, right? Your objective must be realistic, it must be doable, right? Especially within the time frame and requirements of the CSEC level. So your objectives, right, obviously must be measurable, right? So it cannot be superficial. All right. You cannot have an objective that state that the objective is to satisfy the requirements of CSEC for the SBA, right? That cannot be an objective. It must be meaningful data and to solve a problem. So let's look at these objectives that we have here. So for example, to identify the strengths and weaknesses of XYZ business, to describe how imported peanuts have affected sales at XYZ business, identify to identify um, or to sorry to identify how to restore XYZ business to profitability, to find out the source of capital available to young entrepreneurs in St. Kitts or wherever, whichever country, to identify the challenges associated with acquiring capital during recession. So these are some examples of how your objectives um, can look, right? Now, the background or the overview, right? The background or the overview is really a depiction or description rather of the bigger picture in which the topic, issue, or problem falls. And this includes, but is not restricted to, the history, development, socio-economic, and environmental settings. So the establishment of the need or justification for conducting the research as to why or how, right, is the topic or the problem important to you, the student. The impact of the problem or the issue or the topic on the society. Those are two important things that you have to ensure that are, you know, there, right? You want to ensure that it is there. All right. So if we look at the rubric, right? If we look at the rubric, for the background, right? The background values 4 marks, right? So the background or the overview, it includes a description of the topic, issue, or the problem. The description includes the history, right? So you must describe the development of the problem or the issue. that you have observed, right? The description must include the development, the problem must be developed, right? So you have to talk about how the problem developed. Establish the need for research. In other words, why is this topic important to you? In other words, you need to justify why the SBA is important, right? And then also you need to talk about the impact of the SBA, of the topic or the problem or the issue on the society. So the impact of the topic, issue or problem on the society must be adequately described. The description must show how the topic, issue or the problem affects the lives of not just the student, but people in society as well. You want to ensure that. So let's look at an example. All right, so let's look at this example. So the local health department has reported an increase in cases such as carpal tunnel syndrome, deterioration in sight, poor circulation, and pain in the neck, shoulder, and back. The data suggests that many of the patients who present with these symptoms work in offices and businesses related environments. According to the Statistical Department of Antigua and Barbuda, 48% of all taxi drivers experience. So this is one way you can develop. This is one way you can develop. You can talk about your issue and how it affects the society. Another one, according to the Statistical Department of Antigua and Barbuda, 48% of all taxi drivers experienced seasonal unemployment in 2016. And this is a situation which can have significant implications for the well-being of their families as well as for the socio-economic climate of the country. Besides, this is a Caribbean phenomenon where many territories depend on tourism or the tourist industry for a large part of their revenue, right? So this is really how you show that it impacts the society, right? So let's move on now to a critical part of the SBA, which is the methodology. So the methodology now. The methodology really talks about the methods that you use to collect information or your data, right? So you're going to describe your data collection instrument. It must be clearly described. You get what I'm saying? You must identify the instrument that you're going to use. So it can be questionnaire, can be survey, can be interview, whatever it is. You must identify it, clearly identify it. So you state it. You need to also detail the details that are needed, right, for your instrument in the SBA. You need to talk about the number of questions that you ask, the type of questions that you ask, whether it be open-ended questions, closed-ended questions, why you decide to use those type of questions. Data collection instrument, it should be appropriate for the type of data. So you need to determine whether the instrument is appropriate to collect data for the SBA topic based on the research conducted. Include at least two instruments of data collection. The instruments used must be appropriate and can collect the data that you require, right? The process of data collection is critical. So you have to describe how you go about collecting the data. So the following should be discussed and use these questions as a guide. Is the population identified? So you must identify the population. How was the sample selected and who comprised of the sample, right? So you can say, well, let's say you are looking at people in XYZ business, all right? So you're looking at employees of XYZ business. How did you make that decision? Well, the decision was easy because, I mean, you're looking at this business, whatever the case might be. Where was the data collected? You state where. When was it collected? You state when. How long did the entire process of data collection take? You state that, right? How was the data collected? You describe the process, what you actually did, right? day one you went to this, or week one you went there, you spoke with the owner, you wrote a letter, whatever the case might be, just describe, descriptive writing. That is all that there is to that. All right. Now you have to also justify your methods of collecting data. And when I say justify, I mean you have to state why you chose this particular method of collecting data as opposed to the other methods that you could have used. So if you're using a questionnaire, then you have to tell me why. Why did you choose a questionnaire? So in other words, you're going to be talking about the advantages of a questionnaire. And that's a simple Google, right? You can get the advantages of a questionnaire. You must not only talk about the advantages, but you must talk about the limitations or the disadvantages of using that method, right? So you look at the limitations, right? You can talk about the disadvantage of the instrument, lack of access to personnel, lack of access to required documentation. All of these things can be limitation to the data collection method that you would have chosen. All right. The the methodology values 10 whole marks. So you want to ensure that you double down and get as much marks as you possibly can, right? So let's look at some more information concerning the methodology, right? So it speaks to how the research was conducted. This includes sample, data collection instruments, and the strategies that you use to collect, present, and analyze data during the research as well as in the report. These must be clearly described. So I want you to get a picture of the methodology. It is more descriptive in nature. You're telling you're telling how you go about collecting the data. Your instruments must be justified based on the nature and the purpose of the research. Data presentation and analysis strategies must be related to and appropriate for the field of study and research. Findings that are presented must be consistent with the analysis, right? Whatever limitation you face must be clearly outlined, right? So look at these examples. So for example, with the sample, you can say a a community, business, office, sole trader, group of workers, whatever. That's an example of a sample. The data collection strategies, as I was saying before, surveys, interviews, examination of documents, observation, questionnaire, focus group meeting, right? Um, sorry, for strategies, questionnaire would not be there. Data collection instruments, you would have questionnaire, interview schedule, observation schedule, checklist, right? Method of presentation like tables and graph, right? For the method of analysis, you can use statistics such as mean, median, mode. And you know that when we talk about mean, we're talking about the average, right? As well as relevant calculations using relevant formulas if necessary to your thing. Be sure to use the jargon of the subject that you are doing. That helps. All right. Then when we reach to the presentation of data now, right? So this is the methodology and presentation. But when you reach to the presentation, let me show you the rubric for the presentation now. Presentation and analysis of data also values 10 marks. So it is very important. So the data is presented in an appropriate form using tables, charts, graph. At least two graphs must be used. Right? All diagram must be presented with brief descriptions. All graphs should be labeled. Both quantitative data and qualitative data can be presented. Right? Data presented are relevant to the objectives of the project. Right? The data presented must reflect the objective of the study and the questions asked in the data collection instrument. So the data must be adequately analyzed, right? So the data collected must be discussed in light of the research objectives, right? So when you collect the data, you use your research objectives to guide what you are going to report on, right? You can use statistics like mean, mode, median to present, right? And the findings, as a matter of fact, you get marks for it, see there. The findings are consistent with the analysis. So at least two findings that reveal what the data is showing. And then you move to a conclusion. The conclusion is really a summary of what you would have done, right? So it's a brief statement indicating what the project or the research was about and how it is linked to the findings. It should include the topic, issue, or problem and the findings of the data collected. Conclusion must be logical and based on findings, right? It must be based on the data that you would have garnered. Recommendations now, right? They must be realistic and informed by your findings. So at least two recommendations must be given, and these must be based on the findings, right? Your recommendations contribute to a better understanding of the topic, issue, and problem, and the recommendation values 4 marks. The presentation and analysis values 10 marks. Then you have the bibliography, which values 1 mark, right? And you should know how to do a bibliography. The overall presentation, right? You get marks for that, 2 marks for the overall presentation. Your work should be free of spelling error, right? Expression of logical ideas. Um, it must, whatever you're presenting must be logical, right? So that's how you get the 40 marks right there, all right? So you want to ensure that whatever you are presenting on, right, you are presenting it properly. So the conclusion, it must be logical based on findings. Do not be tempted to draw biased conclusion to suit what you thought was in the field. Use the data that you gather. So for example, from our findings, it is evident that the benefits derived from shopping online heavily outweigh those gained from shopping logically. And as such, we conclude that it is indeed more economical to engage in e-commerce. When you have recommendations now, right, you are going to be giving your advice, right? So your recommendation must be realistic and informed by the findings, and they should contribute to a better understanding of the topic, right? For example, young entrepreneurs should do thorough research of various sources of funding available, and you can read the rest, right? Your references and your overall presentation, you get marks for that. So let me show you what your content or your entire POB or economics or accounts SBA would entail, right? So you must ensure that you have certain information in. So this is how your SBA would look, right? So the table of content, right? Topic is a problem, objective, methodology, conclusion, recommendation. The methodology will contain the presentation of data just the same. All right. So let me know if this video helped, and if this video helped, right, please feel free to hit a like, right? You can also reach out to me. Um, I I do provide private tutoring, right? If you look in the description, you will see that if you are here by this time, right? So just reach out and let me know what is what, and if this video was helpful, drop a like, drop a comment, and drop a share and subscribe. All right, take care. Walk good.